having the hardcover saying fighting terrorism with education, I've also learned from talking with Islamic scholars, there's an important message in the Quran. It's very implicitly stated and spelled out in the Holy Quran that when a young man goes on jihad, and a jihad is actually a quest, and most often it's a noble quest. It's a spiritual endeavor or a quest to seek knowledge. But a jihad could also mean if a guy's going into a jihadi group. But before a young man goes on jihad, he has to get permission and blessings of his mother first. And if he doesn't do that, it's very shameful or disgraceful. And after 9/11, the Taliban had a high desertion rate. They were trying to go around getting recruits to fight against the imminent U.S. intervention and the coalition. And they mainly went into large swaths of illiterate, impoverished society because educated women were refusing to allow their son to join the Taliban. Even in our own backyard, in America, often you have like a less educated single mother, parent who's in a difficult position. If the higher education a woman has, the more likely her son is to go on with education or get a job rather than getting into violence or into drugs. And certainly she won't condone her son getting into a gang or into drugs. Sometimes I've been criticized for that because some people say, well, all the 9/11 hijackers were educated. In fact, some of them even had university degrees. And that certainly is true. But nobody bothered to check their mothers. Nearly all their mothers were illiterate. And I doubt that they talked to their mothers to go to New York and commit the atrocity that happened on 9/11. So first, I've got some really exciting news. And then I have to, unfortunately, talk to you about some negative news. I've been in perhaps about 120 cities over the last 14 months. And I've talked to maybe 50,000 people. And I ask this question most places I go. And I'm going to ask you today, how many of you are aware of the fact that in Afghanistan today, there are 5.2 million children going to school, and 1.8 million of those are female. And in 2000, which was the Taliban heyday, there was only 800,000 kids in school. How many of you know that fact? One, two, you one? Anybody? Okay, one person. So that makes my total now that I've counted about 50,000 people, 21 people in America. And to me, that's the single most incredible, inspiring news to come out of that country. That alone is justification for everything that has happened there, the sacrifice, the cost, and the investment in that country. And nobody in America is aware of that. The media, the government, the people. And to me, that news should be broadcast from every mountaintop in this country. And in this little publication called Hope, we write about that. So if you can do anything for us, go and tell people that there's some really good things happening, and it's related to education, and that the number of kids in Afghanistan now has gone up sixfold since 2000. Unfortunately, there's other forces at work. In the last year, the Taliban have bombed or destroyed more than 400 mostly girls' schools. And it's a travesty. What is sometimes amazing, though, is that if you go back to these schools, they've been written off the government records. They're not getting any more funding, but some kids are still trying to go to school in these villages. And I think that we owe it to those brave children and to their communities and those countries that we should do everything we can to help those kids continue school. And don't worry every day about the IED counts and the schools that have been bombed, but worry about those brave children who are still trying to go to school. This is Hushay School. We opened up in 1998. There's 12 girls in the front row. I asked them to increase the number of girls by 10% a year. They don't know how to do their math there, so this is what happened 1 year later. Now there's 2 rows of girls going to school in Hushay. This is on the far left in the back. The silver beard is a man named Aslam. He's the first man to get an education in Hushay, and his story is in the book. An incredible story about how he left his village, and his father gave him a bag of shekels and booted him across the river and said, don't come back until you get your education. And basically that's what he did. He had these yak boots on, and he walked into this kind of more urban area, and everybody's looking at him. And if you ask most men there, in the back, what's the most proudest moment in your life? Most of the men will say, the birth of my firstborn son. But not Aslam on the far left. Assam will tell you, the proudest moment in my life is to see my 2 daughters going to school in Hushay village. And the woman on the extreme far right, her name is Shakila. Shakila is the first girl to get an education in that whole valley of about 4,000 people. Shakila first started writing with sticks in the sand. Today she's in her 2nd year of medical school in Lahore in Pakistan. She's scoring in the 90s. Her father told her, you should not become a doctor, it's really messy, you've got to become a teacher. But she's determined to become a physician and go back to her village and become a physician to help her community. And it's an incredible story of how she's, like her father, has persevered. This is Aziza, who's from Charperson Valley. It's on the Afghan border. It's a valley of about 4,000 people. Aziza was the first girl to get an education in her village. And even though the communities there are somewhat proactive about girls' education, it was difficult for Aziza when she first went to school. The boys used to throw pebbles at her when she came to school. And later on, a couple teachers did not want to teach her because she was female. And then when she got to high school, some of the boys stole her notebooks because they didn't want her to graduate. Well, guess what? Aziza graduated. And Aziza, there's no medicine, no clinic, no hospital here. Before Aziza started working in 2000 in Charperson Valley, 5 to 20 women died in childbirth every year in Charperson Valley. So Aziza went to 2 years of training, cost us about $800. She came back, her pay is just over $1 per day. Not one woman has died in Charperson Valley since Aziza's come back and is working there. And now I'm going to jump forward a little bit. We get hundreds of letters in our office and also emails. And some of the most, say, powerful or poignant emails are those from our armed forces serving in Afghanistan and sometimes Iraq. And recently, I got an email from a colonel. I'll just call his name. His first name is Chris. And he's the commander of the Sabre forces it's called FOB, Forward Operating Base in Nare province. It's in Kunar, Nuristan province in eastern Afghanistan. One of the most difficult, dangerous areas to serve. And he wrote to me, first as a commander, but also as a father and a husband, and he told me a little bit about how difficult it was. And then he said, where he had all his guys read 3 cups of tea, and he said, really, without education, whatever we do here is in vain. He said, it's education, and I'll quote him, education is what will determine if the young men and women become patriotic or literate patriots or illiterate terrorists. And he said the stakes could not be higher. The stakes could not be higher. And this comes from a U.S. military commander in Afghanistan.